You've been sold a myth that medieval weddings were all lace and lute songs. They weren't. They were tighter than a moneylender's purse, and somehow more romantic for it. Here's the paradox. The stricter the rules of medieval marriage, the wilder the stories hiding between them. Tonight, we'll read those stories out loud. First, a promise. Quick wins for your curiosity. Next minutes you'll learn why vows began at the church door, why a whisper could be a wedding, why seasons could ban a feast, and how a gift at sunrise could rewrite a woman's future. These aren't trivia. They're the pressure points of medieval wedding customs, the odd rules that built households, shaped villages, and occasionally saved lives. If you think love ruled, think again. Law and timing did. 3 Sundays of bans could stop a match colder than a January nave. A porch, not an altar, decided what counted as now. Candles, coins, and cousins all had a vote. That's the counterintuitive beauty of the rules of medieval marriage. They forced love to prove it could stand in daylight. And yet, tenderness slipped through. A glove split in two. A ring warmed in a pocket. A morgengabe, the morning gift, turning a night into security. These quiet gestures, stitched into medieval wedding customs, feel strangely modern. Public accountability with private meaning. You'll smell bread, hear bells, and sense how ink and affection learned to share a table. We'll go from porch to bed to ledger, clandestine vows that try to outrun gossip, forbidden degrees untangled by bishops with steady hands, and calendar rules that made dawn the safest place to say, "I do." Expect a dash of Charivari, pots banging like tin-helmeted judges, and a few omens that villagers trusted more than lawyers. If history ever tucked you in, this is the blanket. Why does this matter to you? Because you still live with echoes of the rules of medieval marriage. In the paperwork you sign, the witnesses you invite, and the timing you choose for big decisions. Understanding medieval wedding customs isn't nostalgia. It's a masterclass in how communities turn feelings into futures without breaking either one. One belief you'll hear tonight: order doesn't kill romance, it protects it. When a village knows the path from promise to proof, people sleep better even when storms roll over the roof. That's not just history, that's a strategy. And I'll guide you through it, step by step, like a mentor with a lantern and a mildly judgmental cat. Peaceful dreams. If you're new here, consider subscribing. Then dim the lights, settle in, and let the bells ring softly in your headphones. We'll keep the tone warm, the pace gentle, and the stories sharp enough to hold your attention without stealing your sleep. You begin not with vows, but with breath on cold stone and beeswax smoke, curling around a nervous smile. The whole village knows before you do. Gossip outruns bells. A priest's Latin murmurs through the nave while you study the damp shimmer on the flagstones, pretending your shoes aren't stiff. Every glance is an audit, every cough a footnote in local law. Here's your first lesson in medieval wedding customs. Marriage is less a kiss and more a contract, wrapped in linen, witnessed by neighbours, scented with incense and ale. Betrothal lives at the crossroads of romance and bookkeeping. Parents bargain quietly while you count knots in the bench, measuring the future by wood grain. Dowry isn't a bag of coins so much as a strategy, a chest of linens, a field's promise, a goat that never learns your name. The rules of medieval marriage begin here. Consent spoken, yes, but scaffolding built by kin, credit, and crowded memory. Lovers welcome. Ledgers are mandatory. You sign with words and witnesses. The ink is bread, beer, and everyone's reputation. Next come the bans, an early warning system disguised as piety. 3 Sundays of name-calling, in the literal sense, so anyone with a lawful objection can rescue you from scandal. The notice chalked on the church door, wicks moisture like a tired cloud. Candles hiss, shawls whisper. You stand while rumour patrols the aisles, testing the beam of your intentions. This is civic paperwork sung out loud, not romance killing, just romance proofing. If silence follows, your path clears like frost off a thatch at noon. Impediments are tripwires stretched by canon law and cousins. Are you too closely related? Did someone promise someone else last summer, in a field conveniently forgotten? Degrees of consanguinity fold like a complicated napkin. Dispensations open like umbrellas in a sudden squall. The priest checks his book, an uncle checks his conscience, a widow checks your name against a memory she'd prefer to keep. If all knots untie, the day can proceed without legal thunder. If not, you meet paperwork's medieval sword. Not today. Handfasting, that fabled clasp, is less fairy tale than practical shorthand. Words of the present, I take you, can bind as tightly as rope, provided witnesses hear and memory doesn't blink. Some couples handfast first, then seek the porch or nave for the church's blessing. Others step straight to the doorway, where law and grace shake hands. A ring may trade fingers, a coin may pass like a small comet from palm to palm. Tokens speak an older grammar. Gold equals promise, silver equals proof. The porch matters. Marriages often start outside, where sunlight can testify, and the community can see who said what to whom. You stand beneath a grit-charmed arch, cheeks tingling from the wind, priest between farm and altar. He asks. You answer, your breath fogs. Someone's baby punctuates the record. A clerk scratches your story into a book that will outlive your teeth. This is not theatre. It's architecture with vowels, a doorway becoming a hinge, a moment becoming law. After the vows, property's future finds its voice. Names. Dower, your protection. Not the same as dowry. What you brought. Gets spelled out with the patience of stone. A morning gift may be promised. A token land. A silver brooch. A right to live where the hearth remembers your name. The rules of medieval marriage care about roofs, not petals. If fortune sows dower keeps you fed. If joy multiplies, it keeps you seen. You learn that romance is warm, but security is wool-lined. Clothing doesn't announce purity, it announces practicality dressed as celebration. No mandatory white, just your best. A linen shift clean enough for pride, a gown in colours that look brave by candlelight. Rosemary crowns keep their own calendar on your hair. Ribbons snicker in the draft. Shoes earn their bread on muddy lanes. You smell like soap, the way spring smells like rumour. Fresh, but not suspiciously so. Beauty here is a negotiated truce between weather and hope. Processional customs remember older gods with a Christian accent. Bread and salt bless thresholds, hearth embers greet new shoes, doors creak like efficients try not to cry. Some toss grain so luck will sprout under your feet. Some crack cake so sweetness doesn't have to wait for harvest. A shoe may fly for comedy. A coin may glint for fortune. A bell may hiccup for timing. You laugh because the future loves agreeable witnesses. Your hand learns the map of someone else's steadiness. The bedding isn't scandal so much as choreography, with a blushing stage crew. Friends ferry you to a chamber where rushes hold last summer underfoot, and the bed ropes answer with a creak that sounds older than advice. There's teasing, a hymn, a modest curtain, a candle that understands discretion. In some towns, witnesses stay at the threshold long enough to hear a joke and not long enough to start a rumour. The door closes, the house exhales, the village keeps its commentary to a polite roar. Feasting inks the contract in gravy and song. Ayla tastes like relief. Pies taste like patience finally rewarded. Minstrel's setlist folds in your names as if they were roads on a better map. Bride ale passes, a fundraising cup with civic intentions. You learn the calendar too. No weddings in Lent or Advent if the priest keeps a firm watch. Holy days veto your whim. Medieval wedding customs are really a neighborhood's timekeeping, what's allowed when, and why joy respects clocks. Somewhere between the third story and the last slice, you realize the secret. Marriage starts as logistics, so love has a room to grow. The porch made it public. The bands made it durable. The ledger made it survivable. You're not just pairing hearts. You're creating an address for hope, a roof for winter, a register entry luck can find. And if you listen closely, you can already hear the next chapter rustling. Gifts opened, beds warmed, and a morning where the town pretends not to count how late you sleep. Bells breathe over the parish green, and wax-laced air folds into your lungs as you wait. This isn't just romance, it's paperwork sung aloud where medieval wedding customs dress like Sunday. On the church door, a parish notice chalks both your names as neatly as a ledger. 3 Sundays running bans will be proclaimed, giving rumour a lawful place to stand. If anyone knows a reason you shouldn't wed, this is their hour to murmur it. You stand very still, hearing benches creak like witnesses clearing their throats. The bans are less gossip than guardrail, a slow drumbeat against hasty promises. A beadle taps the notice straight. The bell peals soft. Shawls rustle like quiet thunder. Neighbours count the Sundays on fingers stained by hearth and field. Each proclamation steadies the road beneath your feet and tests your history for potholes. By the third, silence itself feels like a blessing that remembered to sign. Legitimacy here is time spent in public without flinching. Canon law keeps its dictionary open to the page on consent. Verba de presenti, words of the present, make the marriage when truly meant. You'll speak them at the porch, threshold light on your faces, priests between earth and altar. Then a nuptial mass may follow, grace placing its seal where law already stood. In this choreography, vows first, then blessing, porch, prayer, and peace in a line. It's tender, yes, but it's also binding in ways ledgers admire. Impediments hide like knots in rope. Consanguinity, affinity, promises made in other seasons. Degrees of kinship spread like hedgerows on the priest's careful chart. If branches tangle, a dispensation may arrive, paper snow against a complicated tree. Clandestine marriages, whispered, unwitnessed, can be real yet irregular, inviting penance and fines. The rules of medieval marriage want daylight names and neighbours, not shadows and luck. Better a delay today than a widowhood argued tomorrow. Time keeps watch with the church. Quiet finger on the calendar. Canonical hours nudge the schedule. Mornings sit straighter than evenings in the book. Forbidden seasons, Lent, Advent, politely close the door on celebrations that shout. Some couples wait. Others choose market days or fair time when kin gather anyway. The porch becomes a hinge between everyday trade and sacrament's careful step. Even joy here learns to keep one eye on the clock. Money doesn't marry you, but it equips the roof for winter's long patience. Dowry travels from her side. A bride price may move the other way. A dower, her widow's portion, waits like a wool-lined promise against unlucky weather. Some promise a morning gift, Morgangabe. Others craft a jointure to last in ink. A marriage charter gets witnessed. A manorial court may nod. A merchant might be due. Chests fill with linen and token pledges, not glitter, but durable tenderness. Before the porch comes the pledge, where breath and tokens hold the floor. Handfasting binds in plain speech. A ring or girdle or glove stands surety. Hands join beneath the priest's stole. The kiss of peace lands like a soft signature. Kin stand close enough to smell the rushes and the ink. The betrothal vows don't roar. They settle like flour in a jar. From this point, promises move with chaperones and caution. Families shape the corridor you walk. even when your feet feel brave. Parental consent, or a guardian's nod, can open doors money alone can't find. Wardship marriages, pair estates and futures. Alliances stitch quarrels into truce. Uncles bargain, aunts remember. Cousins tally favours owed and favoured boundaries. What looks like romance is also flood planning for land, name, and neighbours. You marry into a map, not just a person. On the day, the ceremony keeps its ancient compass. Procession to the church, door vows at the threshold, blessing within the nave. Then, the feast after, where trenchers, pottage, and roasts do the necessary diplomacy. Sumptuary rules keep fabrics sensible, and colours within their lanes. No peacocking above your station. Some brilliance is reserved for saints and kings. You shine anyway. Clean linen, bright garland, courage at a reasonable volume. Music and community argue merrily for the union they just witnessed. Spiced wine, Hippocras perfumes the aisle where bells still hang in the air. Minstrels tune pipe and tabor. Round dances teach shire feet their part. If scandal walks nearby, rough music, Charivari, may rattle pans at mismatched doors. But when a match is clean, the village sings in tidy circles of approval. Cup clinks, bench creaks, hearth warmth, all the minutes sign their names. The bringing in is soft lit and scripted, so the house keeps its dignity. Friends deliver you to a chamber where rushes remember summer and curtains learn mercy. A blessing for the bed, a quiet laugh, the door closing like a page turned. Witnesses at the door hear a joke, not a scandal, then drift away. By morning, proofs become morning gifts and gentler jokes at the table. What mattered most was blessing, not spectacle. Consequences travel with you like well-bred shadows that still insist on being seen. Inheritance, land, name. All take their cues from whether yesterday was lawful. A widow's dower feeds winter. Irregular unions invite fines and kneeling. Penance mends, but never entirely erases ink already dry. Honour, alliances, peace between families. These are the long wages of doing it right. And somewhere beyond the last bell, another chapter waits, gifts, journeys, and a door you'll call your own. You don't start with fireworks, you start with footsteps that don't dare echo. A mother's shawl hovers like a small weather system between you and boldness. A bench becomes Switzerland, while 3 aunties audit the air you share. You speak in safe nouns, weatherwall prices, last Sunday's homily, and smuggle feel in tone. Candles blink as if they know a conspiracy when they see one. This is courtship under medieval wedding customs, careful, public, politely supervised. A gift must be honest, portable, and explainable to elders with sharp hearing. An embroidered ribbon travels farther than a sonnet and offends no priest. A glove, a girdle tip, a brooch with a modest shine, tokens that mean I'm steady. Fruit in season whispers prosperity. Rosemary says, remember. And it sticks. You avoid flashy metals unless the family's already smiled at the ledger. Even sweetness minds the budget of reputation. Windows are theatres with strict ushers, and you learn the script by heart. You stand in the lane, she leans where the light can testify. Words rise softly, no climbing ivy of scandal, just measured ivy of intent. A brother coughs, a dog judges, a neighbour sweeps very slowly. You master eye contact that behaves like prayer and promise at once. When the shutter closes, your thoughts keep talking to the wood. Chaperonage is an art, and the older women are its guild masters. They pour cider exactly when the conversation needs rescuing from courage. They steer topics away from futures you haven't earned yet. Their needles click while they map both your souls to the household budget. Laugh at the right volume, and they may add you to the good stories. Cross a line, and you become an anecdote with consequences. Market days offer a loophole disguised as errands and bustle. Under canvas awnings, you practice walking at the same speed without touching. A ribbon seller becomes a diplomat. A cheese stall becomes neutral ground. You share a cone of roasted nuts and 60 seconds without witnesses. Somewhere, a beadle counts minutes. Somewhere, a priest counts Sundays. You count breaths and pretend they're for the aroma of cinnamon. Music helps feelings speak without hiring a monk for the prose. A piper in the square tunes to the weather, not to you, yet it fits. Round dances are loopholes with rhythm. Hands touch, then let go on schedule. You learn her laugh in fragments and file it with the precious things. A drumbeat teaches your nerves to walk in a straighter line. Even joy here has curfews and excellent posture. Letters exist, but not always from your own pen. A cleric might translate your heart into Latin that sounds suspiciously familiar. He used the same flourishes last month for a baker's son, but never mind. You pay in candles and gratitude, then pray the seal reaches the right hands. If she answers, it arrives folded like a small chapel of hope. Ink becomes breath when the porch finally says, "Yes, gossip is the weather you can't outro, so you learn to sail it." You give the village facts worth repeating: punctual visits, visible courtesy, tidy shoes. You hold doors, carry baskets, leave before dusk becomes suggestive. Rumour, fed good manners, grows bored and wanders off to juicier pastures. By harvest your name tastes less like speculation and more like bread. Respectability is the slowest spice, but it seasons everything. Astrology and omens drift through the edges like smoke from someone else's hearth. An old aunt checks almanacs for lucky hours. You'll never notice. A magpie on the fence becomes a committee meeting if nerves are high. Shoes creak like minor prophecies. Candles gutter like polite warnings. You nod to fate, but keep your appointments anyway. Even stars prefer couples who arrive on time. Negotiations begin while your heart is still practicing not to sprint. Uncles compare fields. A ledger compares winters survived without borrowing. Dowry shapes itself out of linen, coin, and a goat with opinions. Dower provisions whisper that tomorrow will feed you even if luck coughs. Your names slide onto a draft marriage charter like careful footprints. Love isn't reduced to numbers, it's escorted by them. Etiquette fastens the hour like a good clasp on a borrowed cloak. You don't bring wine without a reason, or words without a witness. If you walk her home, you stop 2 doors early and let daylight finish the escort. At the threshold you bow to parents and to future winters. A rosemary sprig changes hands, small as a vow, stubborn as memory. Somewhere a bell approves and a ledger relaxes 1 inch. When the priest finally chalks your names for banns, the air changes temperature. Your visits grow official shoulders. Your jokes learn to stand straighter. Chaperones soften into allies. Windows open a heartbeat wider. You feel the rules of medieval marriage take the weight they were built to carry. It isn't less romantic, it's more durable. Love with scaffolding and a roof. And just ahead, the porch waits, where promises stop whispering and start to count. Dawn finds you before you find your boots, and the bell remembers your name. Frost nibbles the porch. Candle wax and rushes lay out the morning like sheet music. Today, the medieval wedding customs you've rehearsed become minutes you can touch. Mothers smooth linen. Fathers count quiet blessings and louder cousins. The priest checks the book, then the sky. Canonical hours prefer honest daylight. You breathe beeswax and nerves, and the village breathes with you. The procession is a river that thinks with its feet and sings with its shawls. Garlands argue cheerfully with the wind. Shoes keep time on packed earth. You move toward the church like a sentence building its verb. At the church door, the world pauses. 1 foot in market, 1 foot in miracle. Names gather around your breath. The bell peals soft, then softer. Porch turns into a hinge, and you become what hinges are for. Vows at the threshold are as public as a harvest and as private as courage. Verba de presenti, the priest prompts. You answer in the tense that binds. Your hands meet. The village witnesses become ink without quills. Consent isn't shouted. It's steadied, a flame that refuses the draft. A kiss of peace lands like punctuation where nerves wanted ellipses. The rules of medieval marriage take root exactly where your breath fogs. Witnesses don't merely watch, they hold the road in place beneath you. 3 Sundays of bans earned this silence that feels legal and kind. A beadle's finger straightens the parish notice one last time. An old aunt nods, calculating kinship against a lifetime of stories. If any impediment lurked, it chose another morning to be brave. Today, names and neighbours agree on what happened here. Inside, the nave receives you the way winter receives a well-banked fire. Incense loosens its sentences. The choirs echo stitches, rafters to ribs. A nuptial mass sets grace upon law without bruising either. Bows, crossings, and joined hands beneath a stole make a grammar even children trust. A blessing for the union, a prayer for the weather and the wheat. Your hearts learn to share a beat that outlives drums. Clothing obeys sumptuary rules that keep joy from turning arrogant. No peacocking past your station. Good wool and linen do the talking. A wreath or garland, perhaps a veil. Ribbons honest about their price. Your best tunic may be borrowed finery that fits like good advice. Colours ambitious enough for hope, humble enough for the porch. Elegance is simply courage in a fabric that won't complain. Tokens and texts shake hands where law likes its tea. A ring finds a finger, a girdle or glove may pass as surety. The clerk drafts a line in the marriage charter that will outlive appetites. Dowry, maybe a morning gift. Roofs, not roses, get priority. Coins make their small speeches. Chests of linen promise winter patience. Romance nods approvingly at ledgers that know how to share. Time itself minds the door like a courteous usher. No weddings in Lent or Advent if your priest keeps a strict calendar. So market day or fair time often hosts a happiness that couldn't wait. Morning is favoured. Evening can look like mischief if candles wander. Even joy carries a watch, because harvests hate surprises. You learn that holiness and timetables are surprisingly good friends. When the porch is finished, the tables begin their negotiations. Bread and salt welcome thresholds. Trenchers arrive like edible plates. Steam from pottage. Rides, brief sermons. No bishop would contest. Roasts make promises the weather can't break. Hippocras negotiates chill and chatter. A learns every name. Cups clink like polite thunder. Feasting isn't dessert. It's the ink that doesn't smudge. Music turns minutes into souvenirs. You can hum tomorrow. Pipe and tabor coke shire, feet into obedient circles. Minstrels smuggle your names into choruses that remember their manners. If scandal ever trailed this match, rough music, charivari, has stayed home. Tonight, the village votes with dancing instead of rumour. The hearth keeps score in warmth, not arguments. The bringing in stays respectful, scripted, and mercifully brief. Friends escort you to a chamber that smells of candle wax and rushes. Curtains learn discretion. A blessing finds the bed before anyone else does. Witnesses at the door hear laughter, not theatre, then drift toward pie. By morning, proofs have turned into morning gifts and better jokes. Dignity survives because kindness remembered the choreography. Consequences tuck themselves neatly beside joy and won't be shooed. Inheritance land, name. They listen closely to whether yesterday was lawful. Irregular unions earn fines and Sunday kneeling that scuffs pride. Do it right, and widowhood rights wait like wool-lined coats against weather. Honor widens its shoulders. Alliances put down roots near the hearth. And just beyond the last cup, another scene waits. Gifts opened, doors crossed, a household rehearsing tomorrow. Coins don't blush, and that's why elders trust them when hearts are loud. Before garlands, you sit at a table that smells of candle wax and chalk dust. Names become numbers, numbers become roofs, and roofs become winters survived. Medieval wedding customs switch from poetry to logistics without breaking stride. The clerk wets his quill, the priest clears his throat, fathers unfold careful ledgers. You learn that love isn't for sale, but shelter is, and grain never marries on credit. Dowry walks in first steady-footed, carrying linen and reputation in the same chest. Not just coins, sheets, blankets, a good pot, a small field's promise inked in hope. The chest itself matters, a portable room for a lifetime of ordinary mercies. Aunties inventory quietly, touching hems like librarians, counting paragraphs. Every item says, she will not arrive poor, and the village hears it. Bread rises easier when the millstones of rumour stop grinding. On some roads, bride price walks the other way, a salute to the household losing a pair of hands. It needn't glitter, it must respect the hours she already gave the world. Goats change address. A silver clasp learns new stories at a different hearth. The exchange isn't conquest, it's choreography so neighbours keep nodding. You see how fairness, when visible, becomes its own kind of blessing. Coins speak plainly, so no one has to shout later. Then comes dower, the wool-lined promise reserved for worst weather days. Not what she brings, but what will keep her, if luck forgets its manners. A life interest in fields, a room warm enough for breath on a bad January. The scribe writes slowly, because winter reads every comma. The rules of medieval marriage guard this more fiercely than confetti or psalm. Widowhood, well provisioned, offends fewer gods, and all sensible uncles. Some men add a morning gift, morgengabe, the day after token that says, I saw you brave. A brooch, a parcel, a right of use, a sunrise folded into law. Others craft a jointure, spreading support across properties like careful jam on bread. It's romance translated into acreage, and it tastes more nourishing than speeches. She smiles because security is the quietest jewelry. You realize tenderness can sign its name in ink that lasts. The marriage charter becomes the small fortress your names live inside. Witnesses line its walls. A priest, two cousins, the neighbour who knows every fence by heart. Bound with a ribbon, sealed with a house best wax, it outlives appetites. If disputes arise, parchment remembers what wine forgot. Manorial custom may require the Lord's nod, a courteous checkpoint on the lane. Approval stamps the road, so carts of peace can pass. In the village, some couples owe merchant the Lord's fee when a peasant bride marries. Crude, yes, but predictable. Cheaper than whispers and safer than shortcuts. Pay it, and your union stands up straighter in the manorial books. Zip it, and you invite fines, side-eyes, and winter without friendly doors. The steward's tally isn't romance, yet marriages breathe easier after it. Even dignity enjoys a receipt. What fills the new home? isn't luxury, it's competence given a place to sleep. A household goods chest arrives with iron pans and patience inside. Linen smells like sun and soap, a quiet dowry of everyday victories. A spinning wheel parks beside the window, where afternoons cure. Token ribbons wait in a jar for smaller treaties between exhaustion and grace. You can build a decade with things like these. Negotiations are tense but not cruel when everyone names the weather honestly. Fields fail sometimes, cows grow opinions, sons get called to far places. So figures bend like willow, never like glass, until all sides can breathe. A clerk drafts margins, generous enough for accidents to walk through. No one wants to litigate sorrow in February. The village prefers math that forgives without forgetting. All of this dances under the bell that rings for bands and funerals alike. Law keeps love from tripping over its own feet when the music changes. Consent makes the marriage. Yes, but consent fed and housed will outlast tempers. You sign because tomorrow deserves fewer arguments and warmer floors. The parchment dries, the wax cools, the chest latches with a hopeful clip. The room exhales like someone finally believing in spring. Then through, when coins stop clinking, bread starts singing, and you feel the shift. From table to porch, from ledgers to lilies, the day turns its next page. You carry the charter the way a heart carries rhythm, mostly unnoticed, always saving you. Neighbours nod, because commerce just shook hands with covenant. The feast is waiting to make it public with gravy and applause. And beyond the trenches, another threshold, a bed, a blessing, and morning light counting on you. You think it's your heartbeat on the line, but it's your family tree clearing its throat. Uncles arrive with weathered ledgers, aunts with memories sharp as pins. Grandmothers carry stories like keys. Grandfathers carry keys like stories. Every smile is a vote. Every silence is an amendment in progress. You sit straight, palms warm, listening to wool sleeves whisper. Love speaks first, but kin decide the volume. Parental consent opens doors that charm alone can't even find. Or please wears good boots and looks people in the eye. Father measures steadiness. Mother measures kindness under strain. They swap questions like chess pieces and watch your answers breathe. You keep your temper's leash short and your shoes cleaner than nerves. Nod. Here is worth a choir later. When parents are gone, a guardian holds the lamp and the map. He knows where the ditches of debt run after rain. She knows which cousins feud and which forgive by desert. Ward or orphan, you ask, and the house answers through one voice. Permission feels like wind changing to your back at last. The hall loosens its shoulders when guardians agree. Some unions are made under wardship, where estates marry before people do. A field needs a fence, a title needs an heir, and winter needs less drama. You become part of flood control for property and peace. No one pretends this is poetry. Everyone hopes poetry arrives later. The bargain is sober, but not necessarily cruel. A fair match can still make room for laughter. Alliances aren't gossip. They're weather patterns with signatures. A quarrel resolved by marriage saves 3 harvests of grudges. 2 parishes link hands and share a better bridge. You aren't just choosing a face, you're choosing neighbours and fences. The rules of medieval marriage remember how quickly sparks find thatch. Peace negotiated today keeps roofs tomorrow. Kin convene like a small parliament that smells of bread and beeswax. Negotiations unfold over trenchers, while candles think slowly. One side offers patience, the other offers proof. You pass rosemary sprigs instead of daggers and feel safer for it. Aunties check linen as if it were character. Uncles check fields as if they were temper. The meeting has choreography everyone already knows. You arrive on time, you sit where the clerk can see your face. You answer clearly even when the question is crooked. You praise what deserves it, and let insults die of neglect. Courtesy becomes armor that never clanks. At dusk, even skeptics admit you kept your feet. There are moments for bravery and moments for wisdom's hush. Asking for a dispensation to unknot kinship lines takes both. You show humility without surrendering your spine. The priest's quill hesitates, then continues. Paper can make room where blood once crowded. You learn patience can be practical, not just pious. Some chaperones become allies once they trust your arithmetic. Bring bread when bread is short. Carry wood before anyone asks. Hold the door and the moment simultaneously. Leave early enough to make rumor yawn. Kindness that repeats becomes policy. Policy that smiles becomes family. Tokens do quiet work while words cool. A glove pledged a ribbon, returned. A ring explained, not flaunted. These are commas in a sentence too important to rush. The marriage charter will come. Today, trust drafts its preface. Your name begins to fit in other mouths without stumbling. That's permission of a subtler kind. Every family has a historian with ears like church doors. She remembers winters, debts, and who forgave whom first. Winning her is like winning an extra harvest. You listen, you learn, you thank her by doing things properly. Soon, she's telling your story with fewer warnings in it. And a chapitor. That's the sound of acceptance finding its chair. At the end, consent lands not as fireworks, but as a key in a lock. The house exhales. The table reverts from courtroom to kitchen. A father's handshake, a mother's kiss, a cousin's joke with less sharp in it. The porch ahead brightens like a page you're finally allowed to read. Under these medieval wedding customs, love gets a roof and a root. And beyond this door another waits. The bands, the bell, and a threshold that remembers your names. Morning fields Mr. Lane while you smooth a sleeve that isn't quite yours. Borrowed finery carries other weddings in its seams and breathes like law. Wool and linen rustle. Needles have made their quiet vows overnight. Colour isn't vanity here. It's shorthand for means and mood. Under medieval wedding customs, fabric becomes grammar. The parish understands. You'll speak softly. Your clothes will handle the punctuation. Start with the base, a clean linen shift that smells faintly of soap and window. It's comfort dressed as humility, the skin's treaty with a long day. Over it, a gown that sits like good advice on steady shoulders. No glitter that argues with the bell, just texture that keeps you warm. Stitches hide sermons about thrift, patience, and aunts who never waste thread. You feel covered, yes, but also carried. On your brow, a wreath or garland wakes the green hours of the year. Rosemary for remembrance, maybe cornflowers that still dream of fields. Ribbons fall like well-behaved comets, bright without boasting. A veil can soften the light, not hide what must be witnessed. It's less a curtain than a weather, gentle shade, not secrecy. You move, and the morning edits itself around you. Belts matter more than gossip admits. A girdle cinches resolve. Where nerves want to unravel, some families pass one down. A timeline you can buckle. When it's loosed at day's end, it's not spectacle. It's translation. House to home, betrothed to wed. Felt in leather, not shouted. You learn why simple gestures do the heavy lifting. Hands tell the story even before the clerk opens his book. Palms warm, fingers steady you. Practice clasped hands that mean it. Into that small theatre. A ring arrives like a planet with clear orbit. Gold if fortune smiles. Pewter if patience is your coin. Both honest. Round because promises prefer no corners to snag on. It fits. Relief arrives. The porch breathes easier. Shoes do their own theology on mud and stone. Good leather argues kindly with puddles and time. You walked here. You will walk home changed, but still walking. A garter may whisper about good luck and future harvests. If it slips, let laughter save the moment from rumour. Practicality keeps romance from spraining an ankle. Men dress the part of roofs and winters, not fireworks. A best tunic that knows work and ceremony in the same weave. Maybe a belt with a modest clasp, a hood if wind votes yes. Lingerie sense keeps velvet dreams in check, without cruelty. You look like someone who can carry wood and keep a promise. That style no tailor can fake. Colours speak a dialect. The elders trust. Russet for prudence, blues that mind their business, greens that pay their rent. White's not law, clean is. Brightness bows to station and season. A borrowed cloak can be as noble as heraldry when worn kindly. Ribbons mark faction, only of family and joy, not pride. The palette is hope tinted with neighbourly wisdom. Small tokens orbit the day like kindly moons. A glove exchanged, a ribbon retied, a brooch with a memory inside. None of them loud, all of them legible to those who love you. Even a sprig of herbs can carry a paragraph of intent. You trade these without drama, because meaning travels better that way. By dusk, pockets are lighter, hearts are not. Scent is part of the wardrobe, even if no one lists it. Bolland scent meets candle wax and rushes in the church, cool breath. A touch of rosemary on cuffs, not perfume that argues with prayer. Soap admits to being poor and clean at once, and people approve. You'll remember this smell 10 harvests from now and forgive a lot. Memory is the best fabric softener. What you don't wear says as much as what you do. No coins sewn for bragging, no colours that borrow rank. Humility keeps envy asleep and keeps the bell in tune. The rules of medieval marriage preferred dignity to glitter every time. Your quiet wardrobe makes louder promises than trumpets could. The village nods because nothing felt threatened. By the time the porch summons your footsteps, symbols have done their work. Cloth has argued for your steadiness. Metal has argued for your circle. Leather has promised miles. Flowers have promised seasons. You've dressed not to dazzle, but to be understood without a word. And just ahead waits the hinge of the day, vows, blessing, bread, bless, where meaning moves from garment to charter, and the feast learns your names. The nave exhales, and the great room inhales you with hearth-warm breath. Benches line up like patient oxen, trestles bloom with linen and hope. You can taste beeswax in the air and hear knives thinking on wood. Under these medieval wedding customs, joy changes rooms but not posture. Light puddles on trenchers, smoke writes lazy commas near the beams. You sit where bread will remember your name. Seating isn't vanity, it's choreography the village can read at a glance. Elders near the fire, children where crumbs fall like early snowfall. Kin clusters form maps of peace that may outlast harvest. At your place waits bread and salt, the grammar of welcome. A bowl of clean water nods to hands, not just hunger. The rules of medieval marriage prefer orderly appetites. Servers move like bells without ropes, quiet and exact. Trenchers, stale bread plates, arrive sturdy as winter plans. Pottage steams with a thrift that smells like victory over weather. Roasts settle the table with confidence and familiar gravies. You feel the room loosening its shoulders toward laughter. Outside, bells cool. Inside, spoons vote yes. Hippocras drifts down the table, warm spice taming the draught. Aya makes easy friends and remembers everyone's first story. Wine, when it appears, minds its manners with water. Cups travel like rumours you'd actually invite home. The hall hums in a key that forgives off notes. You drink to roofs, fields, and mercies not yet needed. Bread does double duty as plate and treaty. Sauces teach crusts to carry more than their weight. Dogs under the table practice a patient theology. Scraps find the poor through hands that know the root. A second ladle turns worry into something edible. Hunger leaves quietly, without needing a speech. Music arrives as if the floor had been waiting all morning. Minstrels tune pipe and tabor to the heartbeat of spoons. A ballad braids your names into a ribbon that doesn't slip. Round dances invite shyer feet with practiced kindness. Laughter rises like bread that remembered to rest. Time keeps tempo, merciful and unbossy. Toasts bloom, brief and fragrant, like rosemary in hot water. A parent blesses roofs. A cousin blesses patience with neighbours. You're praised for punctual bands and honest shoes. If scandal ever trailed you, it missed the door tonight. No rough music, charivari rattles pans. At your windows, the village chooses harmony over percussion. Games make the law feel friendly and the future feel near. Riddles travel faster than trenches and cut no one. A ring-hidden cake turns suspense into pastry. Token gifts change hands, like small, good rumours. Children learn the choreography by osmosis and crumbs. You notice how laughter signs long contracts. A storyteller stands pocket full of borrowed dawns. He stitches the vow into the parish's favourite quilt. Saints get their kamos, neighbours get kinder versions. Even the priest laughs in the right places. Memory takes notes in gravy and refrain. You feel history scoot over to make room. Night leans its elbow on the sill and listens. The cup clink grows slower. The bench creak lowers its voice. Fires settle into red punctuation at paragraph ends. People trade seats without trading alliances. Someone begins a hymn thin as a silver thread. The hall answers like a patient instrument. Custom escorts tenderness without making a spectacle of it. Friends fetch candles. A garland learns its last duty. The doorway dilates. Hush decides to earn its keep. You're guided toward a chamber the house already trusts. No one overacts. Everyone understands what mercy is. Feast becomes corridor, becomes threshold. At the stairs, bread and laughter wait with their coats on. A blessing for the room, a quiet bow to the bed. Curtains practice discretion, and the latch rehearses kindness. Tomorrow will host morning gifts and softer jokes. Tonight the village keeps the watch while you keep the vow. And just beyond the hush, another chapter warms its hands on the hearth. You know how some rules are designed to be obeyed loudly and broken quietly? Clandestine vows lived in that whisper-thin space, quick as a heartbeat. Two hands, one promise, verba de presenti, and suddenly you're married. Kind of. Not the porch, not the nuptial mass, not the full village as witness, just you two. And yet, in many places, consent itself could bite like iron and hold. Welcome to the darker corners of medieval wedding customs, where shadows sign. Picture dawn, mist breath in, little clouds, a barley field gone silver with dew, a glove traded for a token, a split coin pressed into your palm. No banns proclaimed for 3 Sundays, no parish notice buzzing like a hive. You're dodging the loud rules of medieval marriage for a quiet salvation. Maybe a father's temper, a lord's merchant, a rival's faster horse. You calculate in feelings and minutes because paper's against you today. I won't romanticize it. You weren't eloping to a poetry soundtrack. You were betting your future on memory witnesses with soft voices and luck. If the union got challenged, a court might weigh your dawn against their daylight. Was there handfasting? A kiss of peace? Any kin who saw your joined hands? The clerk would scratch notes while you offered truth like coin on the table. It's love, yes, but it's also logistics that squeak like a cart axle. And yet, clandestine didn't always mean sinful. Sometimes it meant necessary. A widower promised you a morgangabe, but his sons counted fields like dragons. Or your families feuded over a strip of pasture thin as a ribbon. You moved first, let the parchment stumble after your footsteps. Later you'd seek regularization. Church porch, witnesses, maybe fines, and penance. Still, the vows you whispered tried to stand like oaks in wind. The church disliked fog. It preferred bells and ledgers and bright noon. Hence banns proclaimed, 3 Sundays, a public drumbeat to smoke out impediments. Kinship, prior promises, debts. Let gossip do the investigative work. Skipping that rhythm broke the social drum, and people noticed. But consent had teeth. A priest might scold and still acknowledge the bite. In these medieval wedding customs, grace and order played tug of war. You'll smell tallow and damp rushes in a manorial court hearing your case. Your friend swears he saw your hands joined beneath a stoleless cloak. A cousin describes the token, half coin, scratch like a crescent moon. The reef blinks, the priest frowns, the notary dots sand on wet ink. They weigh your night against their daylight, your no against their not yet. The rules of medieval marriage bend, creak, and sometimes relent. Sometimes lovers used thresholds like talismans, doorways, bridges, field edges, liminal spaces for liminal vows, neither in nor out, both and neither. You'd whisper promises where boundaries blurred, hoping heaven heard precision. A ring from wire, a ribbon from your sleeve, a kiss that felt like oath. You prayed that form plus feeling equaled fact in God's arithmetic. Later, you'd barter penance for legitimacy, chalk for ink. Let's be honest, families played chess while you two tried to dance. A father might withhold dowry to starve your union into confession. A lord could levy fines. No merchant, no mercy, bring coin or labour. Meanwhile, your chest held linens and hope, but locks click louder than sighs. You'd hustle for a priest to bless what already lives between your ribs. Clandestine today, public tomorrow, if the purse and parish agree. There's a wild courage in staking your future on remembered words. But memory phrase, that's why law loves ink and witnesses who don't blink. So clandestine couples cultivated evidence like gardeners, tokens, letters, allies. A neighbour's nod, a midwife's testimony, a cousin who cannot be bought. In the ledger's cold winter, human warmth had to burn steady and clear. Even so, the rules of medieval marriage light their fires fenced. You'd be surprised how often irregular became regular with time. A child born, a harvest saved, a feud cooled by shared bread and salt. Then suddenly everyone always knew, and the porch blessing arrives late. Sins translate into alms, silence converts into parish noticely. Retroactively, it's not hypocrisy, it's survival stitched with pragmatism and prayer. That's the heartbeat of medieval wedding customs. Messy, merciful, stubborn. Listen for the small scandals that never made a ballad. A ring lost in mud, found by a gossip, traded for leverage. A vow said in jest. Was it? And later argued in earnest tears. Promise made under a yew, its berries bright and mildly poisonous. Courts asked if laughter or fear poisoned consent, more than berries did. Clandestine meant nuance, and nuance confuses tidy ledgers. If you're thinking, couldn't they just wait and do it properly? Sometimes no. Time is a door that doesn't stay open. Love gambles when clocks hiss. Between hunger, distance, and forbidden seasons, the calendar could be cruel. So people cut through hedges where gates were bolted from the other side. And where hedges bled, dispensations later tried to sow the leaves. Which leads us to degrees of kin and the price of untangling them. Soon. You think family trees are tidy. They aren't. They're ivy sneaking into every crack. In the rules of medieval marriage, blood wasn't just blood. It was geometry. Clerks mapped consanguinity with little squares and circles like battlefield plans. 4 degrees meant too close, but counting changed by century and region. A cousin twice removed might still be nearer than your comfort suggests. Welcome to medieval wedding customs, where the heart asks, and the math answers, it depends. Imagine a priest with cold ink and warm patience, tracing your ancestors aloud. Was your grandmother Joan's sister to his grandfather Stephen, or cousin by marriage? You nod, then falter, because harvests blur years and names repeat like hymns. The parchment crackles, a bead of wax trembles like a guilty thought. If the line lands inside the forbidden web, your porch vows stall at the threshold. Love leans forward. The rules of medieval marriage gently push it back. Affinity is the quiet twin. Kinship by marriage, not blood, yet binding. Your late wife's sister might feel like fate. Canon law says she's a wall. In these medieval wedding customs, a bed leaves echoes the church can measure. It isn't prudishness. It's housekeeping for souls and inheritances and peace. Muddy borders breed quarrels. Law prefers fences straight enough to defend. So it builds them from memory, rumour, and whatever records survive the mice. But people are stubborn gardeners. They plant roses against fences anyway. That's when you knock for dispensation. Mercy written in Latin, priced in coin. Not a loophole, strictly speaking. More like a legal bridge carefully engineered. You bring reasons. Small village, few mates, land consolidation, fragile alliances. A bishop weighs scandal against stability, prayer against precedent, purse against poverty. If the scales balance, the rules of medieval marriage bend without breaking. Picture the consistory court like a winter room. Stone, whispers, breath like fog. A notary lists your ancestors. A witness swears to whose cradle stood where. You keep your voice steady, because trembling looks like deceit in that light. Sometimes a genealogy unspools clean. Sometimes it snarls like old fishing line. When it snarls, the bishop may ask for penance, alms, or a longer engagement. Even mercy likes a receipt, especially medieval wedding customs. Here's the part you'll feel in your bones, the fear of being told no. You've carved a hope in your chest, and law arrives with a ruler. But consider the law's anxiety, preventing dynastic knots that strangle futures. Imagine children who can't inherit because cousins married cousins, thrice folded. Church tries to prune the ivy, so the house won't fall. The rules of medieval marriage are blunt shears, crude sometimes, protective often. Of course, villages cheat the counting, like bakers cheat the scale, just a touch. An old aunt forgets, a branch, a godparent becomes like but not of kin. Bans proclaimed for 3 Sundays invite busybodies to play detective. If nobody objects, silent, becomes a kind of civic blessing. Yet if an enemy speaks, your kinship math gets dragged into daylight. Bring your tokens, your witness, your patience. Medieval wedding customs, love process. Dispensation letters read like tiny thunderstorms. Stiff phrases, controlled lightning. They grant, they warn, they note the precise snag and the remedies stitch. Often they're conditional. Marry publicly, give alms, avoid scandalous delay. They don't erase kinship. They escort it safely through the doorway. You'll feel the relief like hot bread in cold hands. Simple and complete. Paper warms slowly, but in the rules of medieval marriage, it still warms. Let's talk politics, because nothing in parish life floats free of it. A lord wants two farms joined, a guild wants peace between rival lineages. Suddenly, your love story sounds like urban planning with better costumes. Dispensation becomes policy. Stabilize rents, calm tempers, consolidate tithes. Your vows ride the same cart as taxes and treaties rattling together. That's why medieval wedding customs feel both sacred and stubbornly practical. You, meanwhile, rehearse your lineage like a bard learning a heavy song. The names taste of smoke and barley, and the river's iron tang. You practice the pauses where grief lives. After the plague year, father remarried. Storytelling isn't decoration here. It's evidence braided tight for winter. If your tale holds, the bishop nods. If it frays, the door stays shut. Truth matters, but in the rules of medieval marriage, truth needs structure. And still there's awe in this arithmetic of belonging, if you let it show. It insists that unions echo outward, through cousins, fields, debts, and lullabies. It reminds you marriage isn't two candles. It's a candelabrum with heavy arms. You aren't just choosing a spouse. You're choosing a map of obligations. Yes, the web is fussy. Yes, it sometimes hurts the innocent. But webs also catch you when storms shake the beams of the hall. So you step back into daylight, letter in hand or hope on hold. Bells argue with crows. The village smells of yeast and wet wool. If mercy found you, you'll plan a morning porch, a loud and lawful kiss. If not yet, you'll wait, save petition again. Persistence as quiet piety. Because timing is its own law, and the calendar can be friend or prosecutor. And speaking of timing, those canonical hours and forbidden seasons are next. You think time is neutral. It isn't. It's a gatekeeper with a key ring. In medieval wedding customs, the morning sun did more than look pretty. The church preferred vows in clean daylight, hearts legible as open books. Night hid too much. Wine, rumour, and decisions that dodged witnesses. So the rules of medieval marriage nudged you toward hours that felt honest. Bells, not moonlight, should teach your promises how to stand. Picture frost, still, on hedges, your breath a pale ribbon in the air. You wait by the porch while crows argue about nothing and everything. The priest checks the hour like a bakerized dough. Ready yet? After prime, before noon, he says, smoothing the stole like a sail. In medieval wedding customs, time is a sacrament's quiet scaffolding. You're not just marrying, you're aligning yourself with the clock of heaven. Why mornings? Because sharpened senses make sharper consent. At dawn, debts, feuds, and cousins feel solvable, not seismic. The village is awake enough to witness, but not drunk on evening tales. Light pulls secrets out from under tables where mice keep counsel. The rules of medieval marriage prefer decisions made with clear eyes. And eyes are clearest when the world still smells of bread and wood smoke. Then there's the calendar itself, holy days like stones in a river. You must step between them without splashing scandal on the altar. Lent and Advent are fasting lanes. Feasting on vows can jar the rhythm. Some places barred weddings on ember days, or the bleakness of Holy Week. In medieval wedding customs, your joy learns to whisper near grief. Timing isn't punishment. It's choreography you're invited to learn. You'll hear it in bands. Let none know impediment, nor forbidden season. The words fall like small hail, tidy, insistent, hard to ignore. Break the rule, and you might still wed. But not with full ceremony. No nuptial mass, perhaps only a blessing pared to bone. The rules of medieval marriage don't erase you. They narrow the arch. You pass through sideways, promising alms to widen it later. Think of the farm's calendar and the church's calendar shaking hands. Harvest lambing market fairs. Your body knows these clocks already. Now, add feasts, fasts, vigils, a second pulse under your ribs. Pick your date, like you pick seed, soil, season, expectation, align. In medieval wedding customs, good timing feeds more than gossip. It feeds households, alliances, even the way winter feels indoors. Yes, dispensations happen. Paper bridges over inconvenient rivers. Bishop may allow a quiet rite, if reason outweighs ruckus. Small villages with few mates, soldiers leaving, widows needing shelter. Mercy can enter the room with soft boots and a ledger. But even mercy respects the rules of medieval marriage on the page. You'll likely pay in alms, patience, or a public blessing later. There's comedy in it too, if you squint like a scribe at sunrise. Lovers dodging Advent like kids, dodging chores behind the barn. A groom whispering, soon, while the priest points at the calendar. Wild door. Grandmothers mutter proverbs that sound like weather reports. In medieval wedding customs, timing jokes land with warm bread. You laugh, then you plan, because bread gets cold quick. Listen to bells, prime, terce, sext, names like polished stones. They're not just hours, they're moods, each with its own gravity. Next heat can wilt a vow. Terce feels like fresh linen. Choose a tone that suits your promises and your people. The rules of medieval marriage are strangely musical that way. Keep time, and time will keep you from stumbling. Now for the senses, because clocks have flavors in this world. Morning smells of yeast rushes and smoke crawling from roofs. Your fingers sting from cold. Your ring warms slowly to skin. The porch timber creaks. Pigeons hop like punctuation on the eaves. In medieval wedding customs, even wood has opinions about timing. It favors vows that arrive with dew still thinking about diamonds. And yes, the forbidden seasons carry quiet wisdom in their pockets. Grief and preparation teach you to slow down, to mean it twice. Waiting can polish love the way river stones polish patience. When feasting returns, your joy tastes clearer, less hurried. The rules of medieval marriage market restraint as a luxury good. Funny thing, it often works, and households start calmer for it. If you rebel, do it with eyes open and ledger ready. A hasty night wedding invites questions that breed like rabbits. A penance later, a thinner blessing, a rumour that won't retire. You can survive that, but you'll pay with coin, time, or trust. In medieval wedding customs, clocks collect interest on defiance. Better to spend courage on witnesses than on explanations. So you mark a date, an hour, a bell that sounds like your name. You arrange bread ale and a porch where sunlight behaves. When the priest lifts his hand, the village leans in with him. Consent steps into daylight and doesn't flinch. The rules of medieval marriage hum like a well-tuned loom behind you. And from time we move to place. The porch versus the altar, where space decides tone. You learned that time matters, place matters just as much. In medieval wedding customs, Doors weren't scenery, they were stages. The church porch was public, loud and honest as daylight on stone. That's where promises stood up so neighbours could hear them breathe. The rules of medieval marriage wanted witnesses like bricks in a wall. Private hearts, yes, but vows needed a public address system, the door. Think of a porch as a threshold with manners, neither street nor sanctuary. You feel the grain of oak under your palm, cold and slightly greasy. Smoke from morning hearths drifts in. Wax and damp wool linger. The priest meets you there because law likes daylight and open ears. In medieval wedding customs, thresholds symbolize change. You can't unwalk. Cross it with consent, and the village crosses with you in memory. Why not at the altar straight away? Because consent came first, sacrament after. You speak verba de presenti, at the door, present tense and binding. Then you process inward for the nuptial mass, blessing and bread. The choreography teaches the rules of medieval marriage in 2 steps. Public contract, then sacred seal. Ledger outside, mystery inside. Your feet learn theology, while your heart remembers names. Doors make witnesses unavoidable. Even pigeons look like notaries. Children hang on rails. Grandmothers whisper what they whispered to daughters. The reeve pretends not to listen while listening fiercely. Anyway, this is how rumours are replaced by records and parish notice. Medieval wedding customs braid spectacle with audit, show, then sign. You promise they watch, God listens. The order calms everyone's pulse. The porch also shields the poor from accusations of hiding. Clandestine unions thrive in shadows. Porches move shadows into light. If someone objects, they say so. Now, not 3 winters later. The rules of medieval marriage prefer clean arguments to muddy time. A face-to-face no stings, less than a whispered never was. Clarity is kindness when inheritances hang like fruit over fences. Feel the wood's temperature. Vows conduct heat like copper wire. In frost rings stick, in summer hands sweat and slip. Your cloak creaks. A dove claps its wings like polite applause. Smells wet stone, crushed time under boots, iron in the air. Medieval wedding customs lean on senses to anchor memory in place. You'll recall the porch each time the wind rattles shutters. Regional quirks exist because villages have personalities like uncles. Some married entirely inside, especially in cities or bad weather. Some porches were carved like books, others were planks on posts. The principle held, start where the town can see you. The rules of medieval marriage translate theology into civic eyesight. God sees hearts, neighbours see hands, both kinds of seeing matter. Porch frames property talk without dragging it before the altar. Dowry, dower morning gift, named out here, blessed in there. Charters wait, like patient dogs, until vows give them permission. You'll hear coins and parchment rustle under murmured Latin. Medieval wedding customs keep money visible, but not tyrant over love. The law divides households from holiness, without making enemies of either. Humour finds thresholds easily. Someone always trips, laughs, recovers. A ring drops between planks. A child fishes it out like treasure. The priest cat sneaks across the procession and becomes folklore. Jokes loosen jaws so consent sounds like consent, not fear. The rules of medieval marriage work better when people can breathe. Laughter oils the hinge between the porch and the nave. After vows, the inward movement feels like exhale after held breath. Candles bloom. Incense turns air into velvet with a bite. Your footfall changes, stone cool under leather, echoing like intention. Now, the nuptial blessing settles where bread and wine already live. In medieval wedding customs, place cues posture, posture cues memory. You stand straighter because the room asks you to. Not every priest obeyed choreography perfectly. Humans improvise. Storms, crowds, plague edicts could flip the plan on its head. Still, the logic remained. Public truth first, private mystery next. That sequence protected widows, heirs, and the quiet peace of parishes. The rules of medieval marriage are conservative because memory is frail. Doors teach memory to everyone at once, like a bell. Take one last look at the threshold, where your name changed shape. Later feasts will blur, but this plank and stone will stay sharp. When disputes arise, minds return here like homing birds at dusk. The porch becomes proof, and proof becomes peace in long winters. And from doors, the village steps to beds, where proofs turn living. Which is where we're headed next. Bedding rites, witnesses, and morning gifts. You made your vows in daylight. Now the village pretends not to breathe. In medieval wedding customs, privacy was public property for one night. The bedding wasn't lurid so much as legal, a practical theatre of proof. Neighbours escorted you with songs that blushed and laughed at once, because the rules of medieval marriage tied legitimacy to consummation. Tenderness had an audience, even if the curtains tried to lie. Picture the bed, ropes creaking, straw stuffed like a field under linen. Lying dial. A warming pan leaves a comet trail of heat beneath winter sheets. Rosemary and rue whisper from a sachet, part prayer, part deodorant. Candles gutter and flare whenever gossip turns toward prophecy. In medieval wedding customs, furniture becomes a character with lines. Mattress argues, the bedstead remembers, other stories and nods. Who's present? Not everyone, but not no one, that strange medieval middle. A trusted matron, a crafty aunt, maybe the groom's laughing companions. They help unlace, offer ale, murmur blessings that sound like advice. Their job isn't voyeurism. It's witness decency's chaperone in chaos. Because the rules of medieval marriage prefer evidence to rumour, they'll swear later. Yes, the night began as the village required. No doors don't always stay open. Curtains rescue modesty at the brink. Sometimes a token act sufficed. Shoes off, stockings tossed, sheets kissed. Company withdrew, leaving heat, whispers, and a wooden latch. You learn how silence can weigh more than any choir's hymn. In medieval wedding customs, even quiet can be notarized in memory. And memory is the ledger your bodies co-author before sleep. Then the rituals, with laughter's sharp little teeth, pulling the boots. A garter ransom, a playful scramble for stockings, like fallen banners. Bread and salt, to teach the bed about households and hunger. A coin slipped under the pillow, fortune sleeping on your behalf. Yes, the rules of medieval marriage allow jokes, if they bless the serious. Because joy oils the hinge between vow and duty, night and dawn. Awe walks in softly here. But it walks in. Consummation matters. Matters. A marriage by present consent binds. Union by flesh binds tighter. Without it, annulment can glare like winter through a cracked shutter. Impotence trials. Awkward, meticulous. Honk court rolls like bad songs. Such were the stern edges of medieval wedding customs, however humane. The church craved peace later, so it asked for proof now. There were herbs for this, a folk pharmacopoeia against shyness and chance. Hawthorn wine, spiced milk, an egg slipped warm from a pocket to palm. Old women, PhDs in everything the parish never wrote down, consulted. They knew when courage needed cinnamon and when worry needed prayer. Because under the rules of medieval marriage, hope counts too, and hope, sensibly seasoned, keeps households from splintering at dusk. Dawn brings the Morgangabe, The morning gift, sunlight turned into promise. A ring, a ribboned key. Maybe a meadow with larks like punctuation. It says, "Last night wasn't a rumor. Today is a contract with gentleness." Sometimes it's land inked in a clerk's wintry hand, sometimes a brooch. In medieval wedding customs, love earns a ledger entry by breakfast. The ledger, warmed by bread steam, smiles into permanence. Inventories follow. Quiet poetry of what a life now owns together. 1 green coverlet, 3 napkins, 1 skillet, 2 pewter cups. Your name threads the list like a red stitch in white cloth. If the gift is land, expect manorial nods and a wax seal's sigh. So the rules of medieval marriage convert affection into shelter. Shelter in turn teaches affection to last through February top. Humour lingers, so does pressure. Babies are prayers with deadlines. Aunties count months on thumbs. Uncles make jokes with kind eyes. Someone scatters flaxseed on the threshold, just in case. Songs become softer, promises taller patience, sometimes thin. In medieval wedding customs, fertility sits at the head table. But Mercy pours ale, reminding everyone that time has seasons. No. What if dawn arrives and no gift glints on the blanket? Then negotiations resume, gentler or not, depending on coin and pride. A priest mediates, a reeve coughs, an uncle remembers a debt. Delayed gifts happen like late springs, but notes get taken. Under the rules of medieval marriage, promises prefer timestamps, because timestamps rescue memories when tempers rewrite them. By evening you're just 2 people again, but not as yesterday. The porch is behind you. The hearth begins to learn your names. Don't smoke, bread, and the scuff of boots outline a brand new ordinary. Friends drift home. The bed stops acting and becomes furniture again. And what comes next will test the vows more than witnesses ever could. Heirs, inheritance, and the arithmetic of belonging are already knocking. You thought a wedding ends at the feast. It actually begins a ledger. In medieval wedding customs, vows are seeds that sprout into claims. Land, tools, keys, even a stubborn cow. Everything learns your surname. The rules of medieval marriage went romance killers. They were fence posts. They kept futures from wandering off into rumour and winter. Because a child isn't just joy. A child is a contract with tomorrow. Legitimacy is the hinge. It creaks, and the whole door listens. Marry at the porch, proclaim. Your bands step inside for the mass. Doga choreography right and children inherit without clearing their throats. Skip steps, and every cradle becomes a courtroom in miniature. In evil wedding customs, proper form protects tiny sleepers. The rules of medieval marriage tie lullabies to law, with quiet knots. Now how property moves. Sometimes eldest sons gather the fields like cloaks. Sometimes land is sliced like bread among many mouths. Dowry went out with the bride. Dower circled back for the widow. Jointure, if arranged, put cushions where life's floorboards creak. The rules of medieval marriage balance love against ledgers and weather. Do it well, and February feels shorter by a week. Baptism comes fast, sometimes within days because souls shouldn't travel alone. Water, chrism, a name that tastes like a saint's day on your tongue. Godparents arrive bringing candles and future favours in their pockets. With them, affinity blooms, new kin you count later wed. In medieval wedding customs, spiritual family is still real family. Even mercy follows the rules of medieval marriage with measured steps. Proof matters, because memory argues. Midwives become historians at dawn. Aunties recall who stood where when pains began and bells rang. Tokens kept from the bedding, rings, ribbons, grow teeth in disputes. Charters whisper dates. Witnesses swear to moon, phases, and barley heights. The rules of medieval marriage convert gossip into affidavits with incense. You learn quickly. Truth needs paperwork even when everyone was there. What of children born before the porch scene played properly? In some places a later marriage could lift their heads a little. Elsewhere, land law stayed stubborn even while priests blessed mercy. They could be loved, apprenticed, well fed, and still blocked by hedges. Medieval wedding customs tried to braid care and order without choking either. The rules of medieval marriage guarded hedgerows that hearts kept crossing. Suppose the father dies early. Now the candles flicker differently. Wardship might pass the child to a lord with a tidy signature. A mother's dower becomes bread, fuel, and bargaining power with teeth. Memorial courts count winters, not just birthdays, when heirs are named. In medieval wedding customs, grief is administrative as well as holy. The rules of medieval marriage keep grief from becoming eviction. Open the household chest. It's a time capsule with hinges, swaddling bands, a christening spoon, a key on a red string. The Morgengate, yesterday's promise, now protects today's cradle. Objects become arguments that even snow can't silence. Medieval wedding customs store tenderness in iron-bound wood. Ledgers nod because the rules of medieval marriage recognize good locks. Never underestimate widows with good paper. They walk like weather. They lease fields, hire ploughmen, rebuke sloppy stewards with soft fury. A strong jointure or dower turns pity into negotiation. Leverage, widow, can mean vulnerable or it can mean executive, depending on seals. In medieval wedding customs, loss doesn't erase competence. The rules of medieval marriage let a careful widow outlive scandal. Disputes? Picture oak tables, cold ink, and breath that fogs testimony. Boundary stone walked. A cousin misspoke, a promise shifted. Clerk scratch, Reeves cough. A cat ignores the sanctity of parchment. Dates, witnesses, harvest yields, everything tilts the scale by ounces. Medieval wedding customs wield patience like a pruning knife. The rules of medieval marriage prefer slow truth to fast thunder. Now the long game, betrothals for children, barely taller than a bench. Alliances stitched years ahead, so winters feel less carnivorous. A ribbon, a ring, a charter sleeping in a lord's coffer. You're not just making a family, you're composing a neighbourhood. In medieval wedding customs, tomorrow is negotiated while today bakes bread. The rules of medieval marriage keep the oven hot and the doors latched. And yet, even with fences and forms, life elbows the script. Infertility whispers, tempers flare, fortunes turn mule stubborn. Sometimes love frays, sometimes danger enters the room in boots. What then? Annulment, separation, penance, or the chilly art of endurance? The next chapter isn't a feast, it's a courtroom with candles. Bring your courage, we're about to talk when marriages break, and how they're mended. You walked out of the porch believing forever had a simple shape. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes forever frays like old rope. In medieval wedding customs, there were doors for walking back, carefully. The rules of medieval marriage didn't offer divorce, as we say today. They offered annulment, to say no true marriage ever stood. Or separation, to sleep apart while the bond still breathed. Annulment wasn't, we changed our minds. It was, we never truly bound. Grounds hid in the scaffolding. Consanguinity, prior betrothal, holy orders, impotence, coercion, or a vow made in fear could pull threads loose. If consent lacked, the porch scene was only theatre in bright air. In medieval wedding customs, consent is the lock. Keys must fit. The rules of medieval marriage check the key before they free the door. Narration. A mensa et toro kept the sacrament but parted beds. Think cruelty, desertion or danger, measured by bruised rumour and proof. You lived apart, pledged chastity, and argued over bread and fuel. Households split like firewood. Sparks flew toward courts and kin. The bond remained, which tangled hopes of starting again. Yes, the rules of medieval marriage could be merciful and merciless at once. Enter the consistory. Court, stone, ink, and breath that fogs testimony. Clerks took depositions as if collecting feathers in a windstorm. Witnesses recalled who said what when and where the moon sat. Your story had to stand still while the room measured it. In medieval wedding customs, evidence is memory with shoes on. The rules of medieval marriage turned gossip into sworn daylight. Non-consummation carried a special gravity and awkward theatre. Courts asked careful questions, avoiding the prurient while seeking truth. Sometimes physicians or matrons offered discreet examinations. Sometimes couples were ordered to attempt union under supervision. Dignity strained, but the record demanded more than size. Such were the colder edges of medieval wedding customs in practice. Coercion mattered, because consent must breathe on its own. If a blade, debt, or father's fist pressed your yes, it wasn't yes. Bans existed to smoke out such shadows before vows hardened. Neighbours could say, "We heard a promise elsewhere," or "he threatened." The rules of medieval marriage tried to keep courage and truth married, and when they failed, courts tried to marry them afterward. Property marched alongside piety like twin oxen. Almond could return dowry to the bride's kin, ledger permitting. Margiterment, dower melted, if no true marriage had ever stood. Children's status turned on fine points. Were vows valid when they were born? In medieval wedding customs, love and land share the same bench. The rules of medieval marriage keep both from falling off. Cruelty cases felt like winter, long, grey, and tireless. Bruises fade faster than testimony dries, so proof grew thin. Priests urged mediation. Uncles negotiated truce over ale. Sometimes a husband pledged reform with witnesses leaning in. Sometimes separation gave safety space to breathe again. Even mercy in medieval wedding customs asks for signatures. Penance wasn't theatre. It was maintenance for souls and streets. Alms to the poor fasts, a public kneeling 2 pews from scandal. Reconciliation sometimes happened like rain after a hard season. The court loved a tidy ending and a quiet village. The rules of medieval marriage fix fences so neighbours sleep. And they forgive slowly, so forgiveness can last. Royals climbed ladders. Archdeacon, bishop, sometimes Rome itself. Each rung meant more parchment, coin, and weeks of waiting. A dispensation might untie a knot, or bless a new attempt. Justice walked. It rarely ran, but it arrived eventually. In medieval wedding customs, patience is both cost and currency. The ledger and the altar shake hands when the dust settles. Social weather matters as much as legal weather. A woman vindicated walked straighter, a man proven cruel shrank. Gossip molts, but a verdict gives it final feathers. Feasts get quieter, doorways get wider or narrower by inches. The rules of medieval marriage ripple through markets and mills. You don't just win or lose, You re-enter a watching world, and if the bond ends or loosens, life asks its next question. How long to mourn? When to remarry? What to promise? Anew. Children, stepchildren, and alliances must be stitched without tearing. Tomorrow will ask for etiquette, economics, and a steadier heart. In medieval wedding customs, second chances come with extra clauses, which is exactly where we're headed next. Widowhood, remarriage, and the art of beginning again. Grief arrives like weather, cold, everywhere, and nobody asked your opinion. In medieval wedding customs, widowhood isn't just sorrow. It's paperwork with a pulse. You keep keys, check locks, count barley, and memorize which oxen limp. Your dower wakes up as bread and fuel, not poetry. Neighbors lower their voices but raise their eyebrows toward your fields. The rules of medieval marriage now measure mercy in corded wood and coin. First you stabilize the house. Stewards watched, ledgers squared, debts sniffed out. You learn which promises the dead truly made, and which only hummed. Candles mark 9 nights. Casseroles and rumours arrive on the same tray. A veil says, "Not now," better than any sermon ever did. In medieval wedding customs, mourning is both costume and calendar. It buys silence, time, and a pathway back to ordinary. Then the legal music starts. Dower parcels, jointure clauses, wardships for heirs. Manorial courts nod you into authority, or fence you out of it. A strong charter makes you taller. A weak one shortens good days. Widow doesn't mean powerless. It means audited, watched, and consulted. The rules of medieval marriage protect widows when parchment behaves, and when it doesn't, you make parchment behave with witnesses and will. Remarriage. Possible. Common, complicated. Like winter markets in the rain. Your choice is a triangle. Heart, household, and the neighbourhood's temper. Your late husband's kin might prefer your ring to stay quiet forever. But land hates vacuum. Alliances hate drift. Lonely hates sundown. So medieval wedding customs offer a careful, public road back to vows. And the rules of medieval marriage paint the lane lines bright. Mourning periods vary, but clocks are also social creatures. Too soon looks greedy. Too late looks odd to practical mouths. Bands will ring again, and voices will count your months aloud. You rehearse explanations that feel both true and survivable, because in medieval wedding customs, timing is a reputational spice. Used too much, you burn tongues. Too little, nobody tastes your care. Kinship, math returns like a tax you hoped you'd already paid. Affinity to in-laws may block the very comfort you crave. Brother of the late husband, canon law shrugs. No, unless paper smiles. Then dispensation strides in with tidy Latin and conditional mercy. The rules of medieval marriage bend, but only while documenting the bend. You'll sign, give alms, and marry loudly so silence doesn't start rumours. Stepchildren make the house ring with plural meanings of mother. You pour porridge, settle quarrels, and guard their inheritance like a moat. A new spouse must nod to old promises written in winter ink. The chest of linens remembers the first name and learns the second. In medieval wedding customs, love is additive, never purely replacement. The rules of medieval marriage keep arithmetic from eating affection. Tokens shift tone in second vows. Less glitter, more map. A morgangabe might be a stable roof, not a jeweled pin. A meadow promised for dowry becomes a real calf by Michaelmas. Practical gifts say we're rebuilding, not reenacting the first act. That's how medieval wedding customs translate tenderness into logistics. And the rules of medieval marriage smile when roofs stop leaking. Community theatre resumes. Porch witnesses bands, a mass paired or full. People look for steadiness, not fireworks. Bread warm, alley honest. Humour peeks back in small, and welcome as a cat by the hearth. Someone to split kindling with matters more than a minstrel's rhyme. Medieval wedding customs. Second chances prefer low light and thick stew. The rules of medieval marriage. Nod when supper tastes like home. You'll feel ghosts kindly, not cruelly. Habits with good manners. A turn of the key. A chair's familiar complaint. A lane walked alone. Second marriage doesn't erase the first. It layers like fresco upon plaster. Memory becomes a reliquary you dust, not a chain you drag. Medieval wedding customs allow reverence without paralysis. The rules of medieval marriage ask you to honor and continue. Economics, again, your name may change, your leverage mustn't. Negotiate jointure, like a captain inspects ropes before sailing. Secure your dower rights in the new ledger line by stubborn line. Allies now include notaries who smile at commas like saints. At incense, because the rules of medieval marriage reward careful daylight bargains, and daylight is cheaper than litigation. In February, finally, the heart. Bruised, yes, but not broken beyond music. You learn to laugh without apologizing to dusk. You learn that vows can be solemn without being heavy. You learn that children sleep better when adults keep promises. In medieval wedding customs, remarriage is a craft, not a miracle. Just beyond the craft lies culture's superstition, omens, charms, and the mischief of luck waiting at the door. You've seen law and loss. Now meet luck, the third partner at the door. In medieval wedding customs, omens weren't decoration. They were traffic signs. A raven on the nave roof meant caution. A lark meant proceed and smile. You checked the wind, the wick, the way the ring slid over knuckle. The rules of medieval marriage lived on parchment. Luck lived in people's ribs. Between them, a couple learned to read weather like scripture. Morning matters again. East wind good, north wind grudging, south wind gossip. A candle that tunnels means hurry. A steady flame is a patient priest. Brides studied ash on the hearth, for footprints shaped like future suns. Grooms weighed the creak of the porch like a magistrate weighs size. In medieval wedding customs, small noises become counsel, never mere noise. Because nerves crave patterns and patterns feel like approval. Charms? You bet. Pin a sprig of rue. Tuck rosemary under the stays. A red thread looped thrice around the ring finger, tied by a laughing aunt. Breadcrumb blessing. Cross it, kiss it, crumble it for chickens to judge. All women brewed courage with honey cloves, and 2 stubborn proverbs. The rules of medieval marriage allowed sacraments. Folkways coloured the margins. Together, they drew a map where worry could walk without getting lost. Footstep omens at thresholds could make or unmake an afternoon. Right foot first for plenty. Left foot first for stories you'll regret. Trip before vows and friends roar. It takes 2 to steady a life. Drop the ring, and someone wise declares, better now than next winter. In medieval wedding customs, embarrassment alchemizes into blessing on cue. Laughter is a hedge against the wolves of dread. Animals filed advisory briefs with great professionalism. A cat washing its face on the porch. Expect guests at another stool. Dogs howling during banns felt like heaven coughing politely. Bees circling the garland. promised sweetness that required tending. The rules of medieval marriage don't mention bees, but neighbours did. Nature was the village's second notary, signing with wings. Colours and cloth whispered too. Blue for fidelity, green for luck with caution. A hidden silver coin stitched into the hem, cold as a secret. The ring warmed in pocket for 3 prayers, then slid like dawn over dew. Linen washed on a waxing moon for beginnings that swell, not shrink. In medieval wedding customs, fabric keeps its own private catechism. You feel it when a sleeve hangs brave instead of shy. Wards against envy mattered because communities are human, not angelic. Salt on the sill, iron by the cradle, broom laid crosswise at night. You greet strangers by name, so names don't turn into knives later. Bread and ale for the poor to drape your joy with generosity. The rules of medieval marriage create order. Charity creates weather. Keep both, and storms arrive softer, as if briefed beforehand. A bride might circle the hearth 3 times, sunwise for luck that grows. A groom might touch the lintel with his right hand, and his father's ring. Someone scatters grain, so the hens will peck away mischance. Someone cracks an egg to see whether twin yolks smile back. Medieval wedding customs, rural physics diffuses urban fear. Simple acts tell the heart, you've done your due diligence. Not all omens glow. Some bite. An extinguished candle. A mirror that cracks. Thunder during the nuptial mass made the nave shiver like a horse. You don't flee, you negotiate. Alms. An extra vigil. A delayed feast. The priest's counsel turns superstition into discipline that strengthens spines. The rules of medieval marriage harness fear to useful work. When fear carries bricks houses finished before the rains. Charivari, the village's noisy conscience, waited for mismatched or scandalous pairs. Pans banged, masks grinned. Donkeys brayed like judges with tin voices. It mocked to correct, humiliated to restore a livable peace. In medieval wedding customs, rough music policed what law couldn't reach. You learn to read that drum beat as warning, not merely insult. Fix the fault, feed the crowd, and earn back quiet. If you ask, isn't this irrational? I'll smile. It's human. Omens translate anxiety into chores. You can finish by dusk. They let the powerless cooperate with fate without breaking it. They give grandmothers something to do with their stern affection. The rules of medieval marriage give structure, charms give breath, and breath keeps structure from sounding like chains. So you step across the threshold armoured with roux iron and good bread. Bells ring, pigeons lift, your ring fits as if carved by weather. You thank the bees, the aunts, the priest, and the east wind. You promise to be lucky by being generous and alert. In medieval wedding customs, luck favours the diligent over the loud. And yet, the village still keeps its pans handy for the next lesson in noise. You've learned the centre, now let's walk the edges where rules flex. In medieval wedding customs, odd situations weren't rare. They were Tuesday. Scribes loved tidy lines. Life doodled in the margins anyway. Here the rules of medieval marriage: blink, adjust, and keep walking. Strange doesn't mean lawless. It means carefully negotiated with candles. Listen close. The exceptions teach you how the system actually breathes. Marriage by proxy lived, where distance and politics carried sharp elbows. A all-off-on campaign sent a trusted cousin to take the hand. A ring travelled with letters. An envoy spoke consent like a flute. Later, The couple met and sealed what parchment had already started. In medieval wedding customs, presents could be legal, then physical. Then, the rules of medieval marriage allowed bridges when roads were long. Child betrothals tightened alliances years before voices broke. Guardians promised futures. Marriage charters napped in carved coffers. But consent at marriage had to be truly theirs, not borrowed. When age ripened, the church asked for their present tense, I do. The rules of medieval marriage tried to keep tomorrow from stealing today. Still, families pressed. Pastors listened for the tremor in yes. Prisons and sanctuaries witnessed vows that felt like flint on steel. Priest might bless hands through iron bars, steady as winter. Bread smell from the street drifted in rude and comforting. Witnesses signed with eyes when ink couldn't cross thresholds. In medieval wedding customs, mercy looked for places to stand. And the rules of medieval marriage followed careful as a gala's key. Jurisdictions overlapped, like roof slates on a wet day. Couples slipped to boundary stones to dodge a fee or a feud. Marry in one parish, feast in another, register where records were kind. A lord's mership might shrink if the ledger couldn't quite catch you. The rules of medieval marriage didn't love loopholes, but they counted them. Villagers counted too with smiles that knew more than they said. Mixed status tangled hearts with hierarchy. Free wed, unfree more than songs admit. Lords wanted labour, steady and rents predictable as frost. Fees, oaths, and permissions tried to square the human circle. Sometimes love paid in coin, sometimes coin learned new manners. In medieval wedding customs, liberty could be dowry and destination both. The rules of medieval marriage paced beside, clipboard in hand. About handfasting for a year and a day, you've heard the campfire version. The truth is knotty. Betrothal could be solemn, but not all were marriages. Verba de futuro promised later. Verba de presenti made it now. Some regions blessed handfasts strongly. Others treated them as prelude. So yes, pledges mattered, but timetables mattered more to courts. Medieval wedding customs cherish intent. The rules of medieval marriage file timing. Plague years and interdictions turned calendars into tightrope wire. Bells tolled more often. Churches smelled of vinegar and resolve. Rites shrank to bone. Porch vows, swift blessings, feasts postponed. Bishops wrote dispensations like rain checks for better weather. In medieval wedding customs, love learns to breathe through a mask. Law nods. Fewer flowers, more names spelled correctly. Regional flavours seasoned the stew without replacing the broth. Welsh valleys kept hints of bride price long after canon frowned. Norse memories. Marriage more Danico, echoed in older sagas, not ledgers. Scottish borders clung to brisk, handfast habits beside church. The rules of medieval marriage worked in Latin. Villages translated to local. Meaning stayed stable. Method wore the dialect of place. Illness and stigma raised quiet questions. The law tried to answer. Lepers married in chapels, set apart with care and consent clear. Disability didn't cancel vows. Deception did, if proved. Communities negotiated contact, housing, and the dignity of bread. In medieval wedding customs, compassion learned procedure one step at a time. The rules of medieval marriage guarded both soul and street. Symbols got weirder at the fringes, charming and absolutely unofficial. A sword offered as ring. A belt exchanged as portable promise. Shoes tapped thresholds, coins split and kissed, then hidden in hems. Courts smiled at tokens, then asked for witnesses anyway. Medieval wedding customs love poetry. Ledgers love prose. Both together kept households from arguing with winter. Edge cases end up in songs, but they also end up in files. What survives isn't just romance, it's receipts against chaos. That's the secret lesson you've earned by walking the borders. The system bends, but it bends toward bread, peace, and public truth. The rules of medieval marriage sound strict until storms arrive. Then, medieval wedding customs show you how to make shelter feel like grace. You've reached the far edge of the field and turned back toward town. Smoke rises, bells rehearse, porches yawn like old cats in sun. We've toured the map, now let's bait curiosity for the bigger audience. Next, I'll craft an opening that snaps eyes wide in 10 seconds flat. A doorway sentence, a paradox, a promise you can taste. And then, if you like, we'll land the whole journey with quiet thunder. Step back with me. We've walked porches slick with dew, beds that creaked like ships, and ledgers that remembered when people forgot. If you listen closely, the bells are still fading in the rafters. What remains is simple and stubborn. Medieval wedding customs taught villagers to turn feelings into futures, and the rules of medieval marriage, for all their fuss, were the scaffolding that let love stand in daylight without shaking. You saw how consent needed an audience, how timing braided with faith, and how a coin at sunrise could become winter bread. That's not romance killing, that's romance protecting. The old world insisted that tenderness show its receipt, witnesses, banns, a porch where promises could breathe. In a noisy age, there's something tender about that clarity, a kindness that refuses to leave two people alone with rumour. Maybe you felt it. Law and affection in a quiet duet. The rules of medieval marriage went perfect. Sometimes they bruised the innocent or moved too slow, but they tried to keep chaos from eating supper. And the soft magic rue in a hem, bees at the garland, kept courage warm while paperwork cooled. Together, medieval wedding customs made a household out of thin air and goodwill. Carry this forward. Well, ask yourself, what is your porch today? The place where you turn intent into truth people can witness. Who are your bell ringers, the voices that keep you honest? Which thresholds deserve patience and which deserve bold footsteps? Those villagers weren't different creatures. They were you with colder mornings and louder geese. If this felt like a lullaby with footnotes, share it with someone who loves cozy paradoxes. Let them smell the bread and hear the bells with you. History works best as a hand you hold walking home in the dark. And if tonight's journey helped you see your world with calmer eyes, then these medieval wedding customs did their work across centuries. Before you drift off, one last nudge. Subscribe to the channel and tap the notifications so you don't miss the next story. We'll keep pairing deep research with gentle pacing, ideas that make you think, sounds that let you sleep, and we'll keep translating the rules of medieval marriage into lessons that still matter at breakfast. Epic tales. Peaceful dreams. Thanks for listening, and for making this more than a video, but a small, durable piece of craft we built together. Now breathe dim the screen and let the bells finish their echo.